Hi, I'm Jenny Hepler, and welcome to this episode of Connect, the live show that connects your challenges with our solutions. As we're streaming today live to both LinkedIn and YouTube, please feel free during the show to submit any questions that you have in the chat function on either LinkedIn or YouTube. And of course, you can find out more about what we do at APMG on our website at apmg-international.com. During the show, you'll also see some QR codes on the screen, which you can use to scan to find out more about our topic today and our guests. Today, we are discussing what to expect when implementing ISO IEC 27001. Organizations around the world are struggling to implement information security. There are a multitude of challenges and threats to take into account, both internal and external, and ensuring that your organization has effective policies, programs, and cyber defenses in place is paramount, and as we know, often a legislative requirement. ISO IEC 27001 is an international standard for information security management. It also provides reassurance to sponsors, shareholders, and customers that your organization has expert control over your risk management and data security. So, to discuss this standard further and the road to implementation, we have two very distinguished guests with us today. We have with us Tracy Barnes, founding partner, Strategic IT Consulting, and we have Mart Rovers, president of Interprom. Thank you both so much for being here today. I'd like to start by letting the audience know a little bit more about each of you. Now, you both have a wealth of experience in this area. And in fact, you both have combined around 55 years of consulting and training between you. Finally, a number that's greater than my age. In fact, it's almost double. So if we can start with introductions. Tracy, do you want to go first and tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Certainly. Thank you. Once again, my name is Tracy Barnes, and I'm the president of Strategic IT Consulting. First off, I would like to thank APMG Connect for inviting me to be on this panel and provide the opportunity to partner with a man I respect very much in Mart Rovers. Our goal today is simple. We want to provide you with some real-world experience that can help you move your organization forward in today's challenging environment.
Thank you. Mart, can you also please give a brief introduction of yourself to our audience?
Most certainly. Thank you, Jenny, and the respect is mutual, Tracy. And happy Women's Day, Jennifer, and to all the women joining us today. So, Mart Rovers, indeed, and have had my feet wet a little bit in this space for some time. I want to set the stage a little bit with, people following me know that I'm into quotes. And I was thinking of as in a chain is only as long as the weakest link. And knowing, how vulnerable the security space can be when we're thinking of people, you don't want to be that weakest link. So hopefully that inspires you to hang on and then, hopefully have a few takeaways after the show. Looking forward to these questions.
Great. Thank you both for the introductions. So let's get the show rolling, and we're going to start with our very first question. So my question first is for you, Mart. Let's just start at the beginning. Can you briefly explain the ISO IEC 27001 standard and who should be using it?
That's a great question. I'll be happy to. So it's an international standard, like you said, and it's being adopted by thousands of organizations around the globe that actually went all the way to become a certified organization. So they are literally being audited, let's say annually or re-audited, as in, are they still meeting the requirements of the standard? Speaking of which, the standard, in essence, is comprised of two components, you could say. There is a component that has 59 requirements to put a so-called management system in place, an information security management system. You could say that's almost the foundation of which you rest everything that you do from a security perspective that takes care of organizational aspects, people aspects, awareness aspects, things like risk management aspect, we'll talk about later in a moment, and other elements that are basically all organizationally focused to embed the management system into your existing organization. So it becomes, as in, that's just how we do business. It becomes this normal way of doing, conducting business. And then it has 93 controls. And what I'm referring to are controls that are basically saying, hey, this is what we should be doing specifically from a security perspective. The standard itself is something that is auditable. I just mentioned that. It's also, what I'm referring to is the newest version of the standard. In 2022, the ISO and IEC organizations released a new edition of the standard, and that was actually 17 years after they launched the first edition in 2005. So the standard has been around for almost 20 years. And as I said, many, many organizations have benefited from it for their information security. Also, cybersecurity, it's a new angle that the standard has introduced in the new edition, and also focusing on privacy protection. So it's a combination now of information security, cybersecurity, and privacy protection. And as I said, it's auditable, and it's a measuring stick, has a clear beginning as far as what is it that I have or don't have per the standard. And when you meet all the requirements, the 59 requirements, and you have the 93 controls implemented, there's your end. So there's a beginning and an end, basically, when you start building this so-called ISMS, Information Security Management System.
Thank you, Mart. So I just have one quick question to follow up with that. So there's other standards out there like the GDPR or HIPAA, and they primarily focus on one specific type of data and information. So is it correct that ISO IEC 27001 is for all types of businesses?
So it certainly is. Great question indeed. It doesn't matter the size of the organization, what type of industry that you're in, what type of market where you so it can be applied for any type of organization. So who should be using it? Anyone. I've helped organizations that had literally 20 employees, and they want to benefit from the standards to all the way to the big organizations and anything in between. And it's across industries, so it's not specific. And it's also the beauty of the standard because most organizations, they use 27001 as the foundation, and on the top of that, they then do additional frameworks or standards, but they all benefit from 27001 as the foundation.
Thank you. That's very important, I think, to say right now at the beginning of the show as well, that it is that foundation. So I do have another question for you. This is for you, Mart. Do you feel that ISO IEC 27001 training is critical to the success of an organization? And if so, why?
I would say absolutely yes. The reason why is the standard, of course, uses its own vocabulary, for example. It has 38 terms that are being defined as far as, hey, if you read the standard and you're not familiar with any of these terms or some of them, then the standard becomes less useful or almost as in, I don't know what to do with this. So let's speak the same language in essence. It's one way. That's, of course, being taught in these courses, but also concepts, right? Risk management, risk assessment, risk treatment. All right, these are all concepts that the standard uses and is based on. Is actually the core of the standard. Not understanding what that means, you just read over it, glance over it, and as in, so yeah, I guess I get it. But these courses, they home into what does it actually mean. First of all, what is it in a foundation course? In a practitioner course, you learn about how to implement a risk management a process, for example. And of course, who is going to be involved in doing all this? And of course, the audit, of course, is there to verify that you actually meet the requirements. But I've also recommended from an efficiency and effectiveness perspective. I've done assessments for organizations and dealt with people that were not familiar with the standard. Well, these assessments turn into training courses in essence. You basically have to start sometimes from the beginning, as in, well, are we talking about the same thing here? So my recommendation is usually let's do the training course first and then an assessment, because the assessments goes so much faster and smoother, and you get a lot more quality information from these assessments. So, and then also the understanding that this is not a standard with just a list of 93 controls. Some of the standards out there, that's all they focus on, a list of controls. This standard also says there's an organizational aspect to this if you want to make these controls work in your organization. And let's say awareness, for example. The standard is very picky on awareness as an example. So in other words, it sets the stage, it makes things go much smoother when people are educated on what the standard is actually all about and how to apply it.
I agree. And it's also important, I think, that organizations are showing that they have this standard being implemented as well to their customers, to their shareholders, for the data protection as well. So now that we have that basic understanding, I want to turn to you, Tracy, and I want to find out more about your journey. So how did you find out about ISO IEC 27001?
Well, this is how we do business. When we're asked to lead an improvement effort that we're not fully experienced in or don't have a lot of background in that, we tend to look out or seek out the premier industry standards. And ISO IEC certainly is one of the premier out there. But, we looked at the other ones. We looked at COVID. We looked at NIST cybersecurity. We looked at secondary NIST 853. And what we find is that they're very complementary in here, and we were able to compare them. So we kind of made the decision to move forward with ISO. I've led a successful ISO 20000 certification with a government agency previously. We've used their documentation and several other informations in areas. So they have a track record. And so it turned out to be the solution for us in how we wanted to move forward. So I'm very comfortable working within these standards.
Great. So as a follow-up to that, Tracy, what was appealing to you about ISO IEC 27001?
This is where the strength of the standard comes in. So many standards tell you what to do or what you need to address. So, you have to have these controls in place. You have to have these requirements associated with how you do your management reviews or your risk management or whatnot. But with ISO 27001, what it tells you is the how. And that's where people have the difficulty in implementing. So you can read something on a piece of paper, but when it starts telling you what the components are and how you should use those and then how you should build your processes, there's several supporting standards associated with that. So if you look at ISO IEC 20002, you'll see a real description of each one of those 93 controls that Mark mentioned. So it gives you that ability to create your tasks, do your projects, identify who needs to do what, and it really helps you if you're not an expert within this area. It also, there's like ISO 27005, which defines risk management. And risk management is very complicated. And it is the basis of security and cybersecurity management, and something that you really need to get right. So it really takes that to a fine level that helps you. So these documents provide you with a roadmap to build your project plan, and it identifies milestones and it identifies deliverables. And so it really helps you set that effort to improve your process. it helps define leadership and personal roles and responsibilities. So it really is a wealth of information and really does make your implementation simpler and quicker.
Thank you for that. Mark, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Just briefly, Tracy mentioned it. He gave a few examples of these additional standards, and indeed the committee behind the standards, they're enormously active. I don't know if any ISO standards, I don't know all the standards, but that produces so many additional documentation to help you implementing and benefiting from the standard. Looking at, never counted them, 30, 40 additional documents, each with a specific topic. So if you struggle in a certain area, there's most likely a supporting document for you to benefit from that addresses the how-to. So it's really appealing for many people to have that much information right at their fingertips.
Exactly. Thank you. So, continuing on the journey that you've been on with Tracy, Mart, what was the ISO IEC 27001 path that you recommended to Tracy?
It's a standard path, and I'm using it since I've seen it works in essence, and it starts with the training, like we just talked about. Get people all on the same page as far as what is the standard, and understand the vocabulary, the concepts, and what it's all about, and then do an assessment, a gap analysis, to see what's in place and where are the gaps as far as what is it that we don't have anything to show for, or not a lot to show for, or we're doing it somewhat but it's not formalized. There's no documentation, for example, or it's in one person's head, and that's the only person to talk to. So do an assessment to surface all these opportunities for improvement, and then launch a coaching period, basically, as in a few things now with the understanding of the standards, the organization can do themselves, but there might be moments as in it would be helpful if our coach, Mart in this case, could help. In other words, help where needed, when needed, at the right time, obviously. But also, I suggested a two-prong approach. Mentioned earlier that the standard is comprised of the information security management system components, the 59 requirements, and there are these 93 controls. In parallel, establishing those, implementing those is absolutely doable. And since the ISMS is usually something under the responsibility of leadership, have them worry about the ISMS, and then look for the subject matter experts to focus on the controls that they are familiar with or should become familiar with. In other words, this can be done in parallel. While you go down this path, you'll find more opportunities for improvement, more opportunities to automate things, for example, or to formalize, or to make it go smoother. So initially, you start identifying these opportunities for improvement, which you need to do anyway, as per the requirement of the standard. And eventually, once you get closer to the finish line, do an internal audit to see if you meet the 59 requirements of the ISMS, the 93 controls. And if that all goes well, iron out the issues that came out of that, apply for the certification audit. But in general, this whole journey, as far as my recommendation was from the beginning, it takes leadership to improve your information security management, your cybersecurity. Without the backing of leadership, this could be a long, long program, which I've seen fail as well, because there was no backing.
Yes, it's very important to have leadership involved, to have that foundation. And so now that Mart's explained more about the journey and the specifics of it, so Tracy, my question for you now is, did ISO IEC 27001 live up to your expectations? And if so, how?
Absolutely. It put us on a pathway to make our organization better. And that's what we try to do every single day, and what we should focus on. Mart mentioned a little bit about internal audits, and that's a very good comment and a very good system. So what an internal audit does is it gives us an independent review of our progress and highlights and identifies where we're still deficient. So it gives us that information that we need to know how to move forward. We then take those deficiencies that are identified in the internal audit plan, and then that turns into our continuous improvement process. And we track those and be able to see where they are. We can report out to those with senior management on that. And it also establishes management reviews, which is sometimes something very new to an organization. So moving from a reactive to a proactive organization is when you start to review how you're performing and where there's opportunities that you can improve that, or where you're not performing up to what expectations are. So it's a training of leadership, it's a develop of reports, it's a standard meeting that kind of goes over and identifies that. And it also informs the leadership of the progress you're making. And is this a good investment for their money? Because what we'll find is security is expensive. And so you want to make sure that you're getting the best value for your dollar. It also requires us to reach out to our customers and bring them into the decision-making process, which is important because you can't do this in isolation. You have to build collaboration with the people who are using these services, who are using these functions. And it's a tightrope that you have to walk. So you have to protect the data and information of an organization, which is paramount. But at the same time, you can't shut down business and you can't put up roadblocks. So by bringing them in, having these reviews, having the collaboration, you can start to build a process that is acceptable within the organization. And that's the key, as Mart said, is leadership is paramount here, and there will be people in there who won't want this to maybe be as successful because they're fighting for resources, and so that gives you what you sort of need to do. So it's been very good. We're starting to see the basic benefits on there, and we're starting to increase our buy-in. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, probably, but increasing that buy-in by staff and leadership.
Yeah, I think that's also important what you said with it increases the communication with leadership and also the customers. It's important to have that communication with both. And Mart gave a really good overview of the journey. So where, Tracy, are you at specifically in your journey benefiting from ISO IEC 27001?
The organization I'm currently working with, and I've been here for several years, is very large. It's 14,000 employees residing in over 400 locations. IT is relatively decentralized, with the business taking a leadership role in some areas. So that makes it potentially difficult to establish policies and processes that cross these organizations and across these people. So communication and understanding between IT resources is critical. The implementation of ISO IEC 27001 has allowed us to interact with our partners in a way that is planned, managed, and documented. So there's an expectation that they're going to receive information timely. There's channels of communications that are established and routine providing that. And so what it really does is it provides a platform for awareness in the organization. So there's not a lot of surprises. So we're not rolling out a major change and you don't find out when your IT service desk shop starts getting overwhelmed with calls because something's different out there and people don't know how to resign to that. So that's part of it. And so far we've implemented our major processes, risk management, which is very complex and very important. The improvement process for how you take that information from your management reviews and turn that into opportunities to improve performance. Manage reviews, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is important both for leadership and for mid-managers to let them know how they're proceeding as they move along. And finally, planning. That's something important that always doesn't get done at the time or through the effort that it should seem. And so we're currently documenting and implementing all our final controls also. So we're probably well past the halfway mark and starting to come into the final areas. And we're seeing the value and people are excited.
That's great. That's great to hear, especially even at this part in your journey of how successful it has been. So, Mart, my question to you is, now that Tracy's at this point in his journey, what else can he look forward to?
A lot more. No. Tracy hit on a few very good points already. I would say increased transparency. Knowing what's going on, what's not going on. So definitely that's an internal benefit, and that will only increase over time as far as, where are these opportunities for improvement? What else can we do to even become more efficient and more effective? What Tracy also mentioned is the satisfaction of employees, right? It must feel right if you work in an organization where security is in good shape. So, it must feel secure for anybody working in such organization, as in, yeah, we're being taken care of, from a security perspective. And I know what to do as far as what my role is in this whole scheme of things as far as information security. So there's awareness and people know what to do, what not to do across the organization. It's not just an information security team effort. It's not an IT effort. It's an organizational effort, as in it stretches out over the whole organization in essence. So you'll see this, trickling in throughout the organization, and it becomes more and more the normal way of doing business. As in, this is not just because ISO said so. No, we're doing this because this is how we work here, and we don't know any better. So the change in culture is what comes along with that. And Tracy mentioned it, from reactive to proactive, because the quote, as the quote says, right, prepare and prevent, don't repair and repent. In other words, plan, think first before you do something, and that comes with the standard. All these ISO standards that have a management system component to it, they're all about think first before you do something. And of course, you want to do the right things, but you only know that when you think first. There's one thing that Tracy mentioned, and I'm slightly in a disagreement when he said, information security is expensive. Yeah, but I would say it's not expensive; it's priceless.
Fair enough.
True. That's a fair statement. And I think that's key, what you mentioned about it changing the culture. It's not just a standard, something that has to be implemented and followed, that it really does permeate through the organization and become part of the culture of doing business. So my next question is for you, Tracy, and you touched on this a little bit, but what have your customers noticed now that you're using the requirements and the controls from ISO IEC 27001?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, ISO requires you to collaborate with your customers in a deliberate and planned manner. So this is important. So you have systems set up that provide information. You have different channels that you're going to commute, whether it's Teams meetings or it's policies and procedures, is keeping them within that. And so what's happening is you're bringing them into this process, security process, which many agencies see as just IT's responsibility, but it's not. It's the organization's responsibility. And so you're bringing them in the process as asset owners or CI owners. So if I'm the business and I own this application and there's a risk associated with it, first of all, they're informed of that risk. And they take part in the decisions for how you're going to mitigate it or what actions you're going to take against it. And then they have to either approve those or accept those. And so for the first time, they're taking responsibility for that application may being run on an old server that is a high risk for you, and they're not willing to rewrite it, then for them to sit there and say, yes, I accept that risk, that's hard for a lot of business owners. And so that helps you in getting those mitigation levels out there. As the membership on your risk management board, we try to have a couple of senior managers in there, and we're talking about deputy executive directors and deputy secretaries that are in there, and they get to see what these risks are. And for a lot of them, that's eye-opening for the first time. Is listen, if you're a CISO, you know it's scary out there, but sometimes the business doesn't understand that. So by bringing them in, giving them the information, giving them the ability to help you make determinations and decision, they have a good understanding. It also gives an opportunity. So we had a recent action is we had a business unit who had a little problem in one of their applications, nothing serious, but they were all of a sudden concerned about, how you handle access management for external organizations. So how do you handle that? And so they wanted to know that within their contracts and their POs, they had everything involved. So they contacted us and said, hey, we have a concern here. We'd like to get this resolved. And we said, hey, that's perfect timing. We're working on that at an organizational level. Why don't you come in and join us on this? Because you can give us the feedback of what's important and how will it play with the business? Because ultimately, they're going to make the decisions on there. And they were happy to do it. And as we sat down and we went through the process, so you have to make sure that your vendors or third parties are aware of what your requirements are. You have to verify they're in compliance, and you have to integrate within risk management. And so they became part of it. So we came up with a policy and procedures. We changed our contract language in several areas. We changed our POs. We have a pretty good process that we're about to put in place for validating that they're in compliance with it. And that really helped us when we went to the board. So we sat down with the board and we said that this business provider had worked with us, and they spoke in favor, and they identified how this would impact them. So we were able to get approval across the board on that, which was a little surprising for us because we hadn't really been done that well in the past. So bringing them in, getting their points of view, having them help you push this at the organizational level really has some benefits and really can make your life a little easier. So engage with the customer. There's some other systems out there like business relationship management that helps you identify how you want to work with them and how you can best create those relationships. But certainly the business defines success. So if they're not involved, you have a less likely chance of them being happy with the end product.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great example with a customer, and it was perfect timing. So I think our viewers will find that, very, very helpful and interesting. And also just want to shout out to our viewers. Thank you to all of those who are watching at the moment live. Please submit any questions that you have, either in the chat on LinkedIn or YouTube. And Mark and Tracy are happy to answer your questions. So with that, I'm going to go to my next question for you, Tracy. Now that you've talked about the customers and given a great example, did ISO IEC 27001 also have a positive impact on your IT staff? And if so, how?
Yeah. Well, very much so. But this always takes a little time to come in place, because when you first go into an organization, everybody tells you, we're so busy, we don't have time to add this to our workload. And that is the definition of a reactive organization. So here's an organization filled with firefighters. They're out there putting out fires. They're hustling. They don't know exactly how to handle everything. They're running by the seat of their pants in many instances. as you start to build these processes and as things occur, and things will occur and bad things will occur, it's the nature of the business. How you respond, how you're active, are these people trained in it? Do they know what their responsibility is? Do they know what their next steps are? Are they panic, or are they controlled chaos where they're going in there following a plan? And so when they go through a process like that, that's very important to them. And they can see the value. And that's the important thing, is they can see the value of how it impacts their job and how it gives them more level of control and how they can handle those fires. And then as you're starting to reduce those fires a little bit, you can start moving some resources to proactive. So this is where you're doing the protect. You're identifying your resources. You're putting those controls in place that protect those resources, whether it's beefing up your access management or your supplier management or whatever that area is. By those protect, you start to reduce those fires again. So you're reducing the duration by knowing how to handle them, and then you're reducing the number by proactively putting in those controls that kind of reduce that. So when they start to see that, it has an important effect. Mart had touched on something earlier, and it's a very important part. It's training. And it really is important to get at least foundations training in the organization. Because what that does is that starts to show the big picture, and the employee can start to see where they fit in. How is this going to impact me? Because for a lot of people, change is scary. And if you can identify how it's going to impact them, you kind of reduce that. So starting with training, and there's a what's in it for me is they get a certification. It makes the resume look better. It gives them more experience if they're starting to look for a new job down the road on there. And it also gives you and I an opportunity to identify those rising stars. Who are those people that you're going to name asset owners? Who are those people you're going to name process owners? Who are those people you're going to name control owners? So it gives you a ability to kind of look at them and see who's doing well and who might have the ability to take on additional responsibility down the road. So again, is training's important because it gives them an all overview of why you're doing this and what the end game is, or what the end picture is, sort of.
That's an awesome answer. I just have to say that, to explain why why the training is so important. It's important personally, as well as professionally,
Yes.
so that they do understand what's happening within the organization. They feel a part of the change that's happening. That's one area in change that is important, that everyone feels involved and understands it. So I really appreciate that answer. Thank you. So now that you've explained the journey and the benefits to staff, to customers, now my question, Tracy, is would you recommend IEC 27001 to other organizations?
Again, absolutely. It makes your organization better. And that's the reason we're here. We're here to make the organization better. And regardless of where you are in your security management maturity, there's benefits that are offered through ISO 27000. So if you're a mature organization, you have the tool set, you have the established processes, ISO is valuable to you because it identifies what those remaining gaps are. And if you don't think you have gaps, then you're not looking, because you do. And if you don't think you can make things be better, then you're not trying, because you can. And that's what, even if you're a mature organization, you should always be striving for that. So being able to see those gaps and closing those up and getting a little better each day is one of the areas. If you're a mid-tier, so you have repeatable processes and you have them documented, ISO can help you move, again, as we said, from a reactive to a proactive. Because once you have that done, then you're implementing the management reviews, which are identifying poor performing areas or areas that aren't performing at your level of expectation. And then you're also implementing an improvement process. So you're taking those areas, you're identifying where you want to be, and you can identify the level of improvement you want to see and sort of measure it against there. So it really helps you take that next step to be a mature organization. And if you're just starting out, and believe me, we've been there, it's hard and it's scary because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know where to do. You don't know where to put your resources that are important. You don't, because you don't have a lot of them. And so how are you going to handle that? And this gives you the roadmap. And that's the value of ISO. It's a very strong standard and it's done very well. And it's put together by some of the smartest people in the world to be able to handle that. And so that's the value there. So if you're just starting out, it says, these things, do you have a risk management? Get it. Do you handle at least these controls? Then do it. Do you have vulnerabilities that you can take and identify and get them into the process? Then do it. And so that's really helpful for someone who doesn't have a lot of background. I originally started in business, and that's why ISO has been very helpful to me, because I didn't have 30 years experience in security, but I had experience in IT. And so it really helps you in identifying those things. So regardless of where you are in your maturity or how you're setting up, the ISO can help you get to that next step.
Thank you. So now that organizations, after hearing your answers, are ready to go, they know what their journey could look like. So now my question goes to you, Mart. What should my next steps be? So if somebody's listening now and they really want to get started on this, they're not sure what to do, where should they go next?
So there's enormous amount of free resources available if you do surf the web. I mean, 27001 is a very popular standard, and as I said, it has been adopted, implemented by thousands and thousands of organizations. It's a big industry. So there's plenty of free resources available. If you say, well, I want to go straight to the source, then purchase a copy of the standard. It's ISO organization, of course, you can buy it, and see other organizations are selling them. Which is in US dollars about $200 investment, but then still you're not looking at thousands and thousands of dollars, right? So when you're new to it, get exposed that way. Read up on some white papers. There's plenty of webinars out there, also on the APMG website. There's a source of information available, all for free, from past webinars and additional white papers. But get your feet wet that way, and maybe do a self-assessment, because each of these requirements of the standards is actually a to-do for you. And turning these requirements, which are basically sentences with the word shall in it, you shall do this, you shall do that, turn that into a question and say, hey, are we doing this? And in other words, then you put the standard to use that you just purchased, and then do yourself mini assessment, self-assessment, as in, where are these gaps? Where are these glaring holes? You get an idea how far off you are, how close you are. So if you're familiar to the ISO standards and maybe are already ISO certified, you may already have a management system in place, and it will be easy then for you to tag on the 27001 requirements. I've had organizations that were certified in 9001 or in ISO IC 20000. And then did an add-on as far as now we also want to become certified in 27001 from a security perspective. Yes, so then it becomes an easier journey in essence. So what it all boils down to is awareness. I cannot repeat that word enough times. Awareness, awareness, awareness. I mean, that's what this security standard definitely gets in place, that people are aware across the organization. Because this is the other misperception, right? I mentioned it earlier, and Tracy touched on it as well. That people think, oh, it's security. Oh, it's for security team, or it's just for IT. No, it's across the organization, right? Anybody is exposed to vulnerabilities and threats. If I just say phishing, attempts that have increased like enormously. You get text, you get emails, and you don't know anymore if this is a true email or another scam that is happening as we speak. If we're not aware, bad things can happen because if don't think because an incident hasn't happened to you that it cannot happen. I mean, in case you do have an incident, it's usually only the tip of the iceberg that you're looking at because it's actually a sign of a much larger problem that sits beneath the surface somewhere. So in other words, be very aware as in you don't want those. Yes. And you can be ahead of this. And there's so many opportunities these days as far as automation of many things we do in security. We read more and more about artificial intelligence that will come into play that gives you the opportunity to be ahead of the curve. Um, in other words, never stop investing and keep learning. That's my final answer on this one.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, just one thing to add, and I didn't mention it, and I wanted to mention it earlier, is it's very helpful to have a guide that can get you through this. So you have the standard, and the standard is pretty understandable, but there's certainly 100 questions you're going to come up with. So it's good to have a Sherpa, someone who can guide you up that mountain, who knows all the paths and whatnot, and he can show you that. And so it's not a big engagement, but certainly to have that resources. And historically, I've always worked with Mart. He's the second call I make when I get an assignment. My first call is to my wife to make sure she's okay with it. And the second call is to Mark to see if he can help me out with it. But it is important. And there's a lot of good guys and gals out there who can help you on your journey. But also look at that. That's a good way to spend what limited funds you have and bring in that expertise who can shorten your duration of your rollout.
Exactly. And thank you for, for letting us know that and about a guide. And just to mention with guides, if we can bring up the QR code again for Mart, for our live audience, and we're going to take live questions in a moment, but, please reach out, connect with Mart, connect with Tracy on LinkedIn. If you're looking for training, reach out to Mart. And if you scan this QR code that you're seeing right now, Mart's offering 30 minutes of free ISO IEC 27001 coaching to our viewers today. So, please take advantage of that and let Mart be your guide. So with that, I'm going to start taking our first live question. We do have a couple that have come in, so thank you to our viewers. Our first live question: are there really big changes in the latest version of the ISO IEC 27001 standard? Mart?
A great question. From an ISMS perspective, information security management perspective, the 59 requirements, not so much, barely, maybe a few textual things. So that's not a big deal to migrate from the previous version to the newer one. And even the controls, it used to be 100 something controls, now it's 93, but they combined a whole bunch of controls, and they even provided a nice mapping from the old controls to the new controls. So really big changes, I would say not so much. I think there's more an emphasis in the newer edition on supply chain as far as the security requirements. The cybersecurity is being introduced with it, a little bit more attention to the personal identifier information, PII. So, the emphasis might have shifted, but in general, it's still, you could say the same controls. So it's not this huge change that we saw in the previous release from the 2005 to the 2013 edition.
Okay, thank you. I know that is a lot of question of our viewers. Another live question that we have is, my organization is considering certifying against ISO IEC 27001. What are the best first steps to take? Mart?
Well, we touched on a few already throughout the at this episode. But definitely, again, start with the training. To get the bigger picture, so you know what you're up against, or what your what the challenges or what the opportunities are. Let me put it in a positive perspective. So get the training first, and then do an assessment. See how close you are or what the gaps are, and then build your roadmap on top of, as in, hey, these are the to-dos we have to go forward. So that that would be the first steps. Look around. There's free resources. Buy the standard. Do a self-assessment, but then eventually do training. Yes, and then have an assessment done by an independent source who can give you the true story in essence.
Exactly. Thank you. Tracy, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just one or two quick points. First of all, if you're thinking about do it. It's a benefit for your organization, and it's something you should be doing. Second of all is make sure you got a leader, an evangelist who's willing to push on this for you, that help you can do it. And then as Mart said, bring in the training and talk with your staff and let them know you're thinking about it. But again, is do it. Find the person who's going to be your evangelist, who's going to take care of those roadblocks, because there will be roadblocks, and then make sure you talk with your staff, the people who are going to be actually doing the work, so they understand what's coming and they feel they have some buy-in.
Mm-hmm. Mart?
Just to build on that quickly, like Tracy said, he was talking about a Sherpa, bringing somebody in from the outside, but you need somebody on the inside who can drive this. And that's what Tracy's role has been in this engagement and previous engagements, being there on the ground, 24/7, but the one who's driving this, the focal point, the go-to person who knows the organization, who knows the players, who's close to it and can drive. So a very experienced program manager is definitely helpful to get this moving. But there will be resistance. People will not like to change, like Tracy said earlier. There will be people in leadership positions who are doubting the whole initiative because it just seems like more work, do not see the benefits right away. And to have this constant push from the inside as far as, we're going to do this, is enormously important, because that's one thing I want to visualize for those watching, is that, that, like this CISO once said, once we had these these requirements in place for ISO IC 27001, he said it was the first time in my career that I felt I was able to wrap my arms around anything security in my organization. He felt really comfortable after achieving the certification. Of course, it was a huge milestone, but it's huge. That feeling, right? As in, I know what I'm up against. I know what I've accomplished, and I know what I'm going to do next. As in, feeling really in control of anything security in the organization, which in itself is a big deal, given that security can be scary.
Thank you. Those are excellent answers from both of you. And, I completely agree. You need the guide, from the outside, but also to have that evangelist on the inside of the organization is very important. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our last live question today. So what is the most common reason why ISO IEC 27001 implementations fail? Mart?
We touched on a few in this episode. Management commitment being one of them. Obviously, active commitment, not just I write the check and then we'll buy some tools and then magic will happen. So you need that active commitment, and I'll leave a few for Tracy. The other one I want to mention is you don't want to have this last forever. I've ran into organizations where there was some momentum in the beginning, and then it tampered off, and then over time it faded away because it didn't go fast enough. There was not enough urgency, and then once you cross it's hard to say, year and a half mark, it becomes more and more difficult to keep momentum going. Eventually, you want to see the results, and that whole advertisement aspect, as in the show me or the looking great examples. That is what is going to be needed to keep the excitement going. As in, look where we were, look where we are now. and look how we are improving and how things are getting better and better. So that internal marketing needs to happen at the same time.
Thank you, Mart. Tracy, you have something to add to that?
Not much more to add. Mark summed it up pretty good. But again, is if you don't have that buy-in and that person who can help drive the process, who sometimes when someone says no, he or she goes to them and says, you will say yes, it's difficult. And so you really want to make sure that. And if you don't have that at the organizational level, then just concentrate on making your group better and certified and meet the requirements that you're doing. And that way, by showing that, you might be able to grow it. But if you don't have that buy-in by senior management, it's difficult.
Thank you. And thank you to our live viewers for submitting the questions today. We really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to both Mart and Tracy for being on the show today. This is one of the reasons why I love doing these shows, because even if I know, a lot about the framework and I work within the framework, to hear these stories, to bring it to life, is so important. And I love sharing this with our audience. So I really appreciate it today. So with our time running out, I just want to have some closing comments that can be shared with our audience. So Mart, do you have anything to say to close out today?
Well, first, thank you, APMG, for allowing me and Tracy to be on this show and give us the opportunity to share a little bit from our experiences. I hope it was worthwhile to all the audience. So thank you, everybody, for joining and watching and listening to us. I want to end with a, maybe something that sticks as far as a quote. When you cross a road, right? You usually, you look at the left and you look to the right. But somebody who's aware, let's say security aware, looks to the left and the right, even when crossing a one-way street.
True. I'm going to remember that. I think I'll be looking both ways. Tracy, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, just briefly. Again, thank you, Jennifer and Nigel, who's behind the scenes today. You made this very comfortable for me, someone who sometimes gets a little nervous in these type of things. So you did a great job. But I just want to leave you with one last thought is, sometimes when we think of hackers, many of us picture an individual in a hoodie sitting in a basement somewhere, pounding Red Bulls, trying to get into our data system. But in reality, it's a business, and it's a business that can be very profitable. Billions of dollars are made every year by these organizations, and they are truly a business. They have HR departments. They do strategic planning. And several even have call centers that can support their collections if you don't know how to create a crypto wallet. So these are big major players, and many are supported by nation states. And every day they are trying to improve how they are doing business, and shouldn't you? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Absolutely, completely agree with that. Thank you both for being here today, and to our viewers. Again, viewers, connect with Tracy and Mart. They have so much, information, guidance for you. Connect with them on LinkedIn. So to wrap up, thanks again for our viewers, and please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also follow us on LinkedIn to see what we're up to next and stay up to date with all of our latest news, and of course, our Connect episodes. So some of our upcoming Connect episodes will focus on digital risk planning, as well as digital business risk governance. So see you next time.